I'm very pleased and proud to have with us a legendary figure, Dr. Wayne Dyer, who has been with us on Dreamland and created some of the most memorable experiences that any of us have ever had on this program. He was with us for an extraordinary book, Getting in the Gap. He has been with us, I think there are 2 Wayne Dyer interviews available in the subscriber section so that you can get into this in some of these extraordinary interviews that we have had in the past. Of course, he almost needs no introduction. Dr. Wayne Dyer is renowned in the world. You've seen him certainly on PBS. He's the author of over 30 books. He is also out there to an amazing, tireless degree. And if you go to his website, drwaynedyer.com, you will find out that he's liable to be in your area more or less at any time. This is a man with a tremendous and extraordinary mission, a mission that has taken him out into the world in a way that few people ever go. And this time he is back with us with something truly remarkable, a real treasure, a new book called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And you know what the Tao Te Ching is, of course, the great and incredible work by Lao Tzu that's 2,500 years old. And it is a daunting task to understand, but Wayne has literally transformed it for us. And Wayne, I'm so proud to welcome you to this program.
Thank you, Whitley. It's great to be back with you. You sound terrific, too.
Well, so do you. Of course, I believe you're out there on Hawaii. Why wouldn't you sound terrific?
I am in Maui, yes.
Yes, I am in Santa Monica at the moment, and I feel like we've just finished smoking about 10 or 15 boxes of cigarettes from that smoke. But it's clear and pleasant now.
Good.
And
well,
that's the important thing. Well, Wayne, before we go into Lao Tzu, and folks, this is going to be an adventure, I want to return to something that was so important to me, that is literally, the book is right in my hand right now. It is Getting in the Gap.
Mm-hmm.
And that insight into prayer is something I use almost every day of my life. And I think it's been 2 or 3 years since we had that program. Could you tell us, just remind us a little bit about the gap and what it is? Because I thought that was so valuable.
Well, it's really that teaching came from Patanjali, who was also an ancient avatar who lived somewhere between 100 and 300 years before the birth of Christ. No one is quite sure. But he was teaching about a meditation called japa, which is the repetition of the sound that's in the name of God in virtually all languages, whether it's Allah or Krishna or God or Yahweh or Tao, whatever name we call this divine intelligence that animates all things, does nothing, and leaves nothing undone. It has a sound basis to it, and that sound is the sound of Ah, which is the sound that you make when you don't have to move your tongue, your teeth, your lips, or your jaw. You don't do anything. The only sound you can make is Ah. And in the book of John, it says at the beginning, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And what I have done is taken Patanjali's work and taught people how to get into the gap, which is the space between our thoughts, so that they say the average person has 60,000 separate thoughts every day. And the only problem is they're going to have the same 60,000 again tomorrow and the next day and the next day, because there's no gaps in between there. And we need to be able to find a way to get into that silent space in between our thoughts. And when we do, we have fewer and fewer of those thoughts. And the fewer thoughts that we have, the more likely we are to make conscious contact with God or with Source. And it's an inner mantra of getting into the gap. And I created it. A way of doing that in that meditation that accompanies that allows us to put our attention on something, like the Lord's Prayer, and like the first word of the Lord's Prayer is our, and then the next word is Father. So when you say our and then Father, and then you go back after Father into the gap in your mind, just go back between the word Father and the word, and when you enter into that gap and you're doing the japa meditation, you will feel what they call, what scientists call a serotonin rush. But what that really is just the mind is just creating that feel-good enzyme, which is really the same thing as the feel-God enzyme, because the difference between good and God is just one little zero.
Interesting. You know, we have a new baby in our family, and not my wife and I, but our son and his wife have a...
Oh, congratulations,
Oh,
Grandpa.
Thanks.
Yeah.
They have a little tiny infant. He's just 3 weeks old, and he's beginning to make sounds that reminded me a lot of the sounds, of those sounds, that ha sound as he struggles. I mean, he's also making some somewhat more familiar sounds, too. You know, roaring away when something goes slightly wrong.
Well, it's very interesting that you use that as an example, because Lao Tzu said that if you want the perfect representation of a Tao master, then you must find an infant. And this is
interesting.
This is a being like in the first 9 months of our life. Lao Tzu says, none of us are doing anything throughout our whole lives. We're just all being done. And in the first 9 months of our lives, we're all being done. Nobody looks at inside and says, "Oh my God, I hope my nose shows up on time and in the right place," and all of that. There's an intelligence that is invisible, that is animating everything and allowing everything, and it's an intelligence that's doing nothing. You can't see it, you can't get a hold of it. Yet, as Lao Tzu said, it leaves nothing undone. So in those first 9 months, there's just this total, complete surrendering process, and everything that's needed for this journey is surrendered to, and you just allow. You just allow. And then we're born, and we're surrounded by people who say, "That was really nice work, God. Now we'll take over from here."
Yes.
And in the process of taking over, we create this ego where we edge God out of our lives and move into this place where we think that we're in control. But an infant is a being that has no identity. It has no name. It takes whatever comes its way. It's in a constant state of just accepting and allowing, and it's not fighting anything. It's not trying to be better than anybody else. It's not worried about what it looks like or what somebody else around it looks like. It's just in a perfect, absolutely perfect state of surrender to the highest place from which it came. And if you could stay in that state, you could literally stay in that state and do nothing and leave nothing undone, you would find that everything in your life would be just nothing but pure bliss.
Edging God out of our lives is something we're very good at doing. Wayne, I think that it would be accurate to say that in this course of this interview, we're going to be talking about edging God back in.
Right.
But now, what does it mean? In other words, that sounds like a very diffuse question, but it isn't, in the sense that when we attempt to open ourselves to God, we're doing something. We're acting. And that this is the exact opposite, in a way, of what the Tao is or is not seeking in us. Is that not correct?
Well, it is and it isn't.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, well, because the Tao is filled with paradoxes all over the place. I mean, every other line in there is a paradox. That's why writing this book was such a wonderful challenge. I mean, some call the Tao Te Ching the wisest book ever written, and yet it's filled with these paradoxes. The paradox of do nothing and leave nothing undone. The paradox of say less and and accomplish more. The paradox of thinking small and accomplishing great things, accomplishing big things, and on and on and on go those ideas of and we in the West have a tendency to think that this is just a prescription for being lazy and not doing anything. When in fact, when you say edging God back in, what that's really doing is just re-identifying yourself with the highest place within yourself. It's not so much identifying yourself on the basis of what I have and what I do and what I accomplish and what other people think of me and my idea of my separation from everything and everyone else. It's just shifting around your identity so that you understand that who you are is not this body and all of the stuff that you accumulate. That who you are. Like every person listening to the show right now, just ask yourself, how many bodies have I been in since I showed up here on this planet? From the very moment that you were just one tiny little cell, a little tiny drop of human protoplasm, which had everything that you needed for this physical journey in it, to the time when you were an infant, and then you were a toddler, a pre-toddler, and a toddler, and a pre-adolescent, and an adolescent, and you were a 20-year-old. And for me, I've been a 30-year-old and in a 40-year-old body, and I constantly realize that I keep stepping into new bodies. In fact, I'm in a different body now than when you and I started this interview a few moments ago. So that who I am is infinite, who I am is formless, who I am is boundaryless, who I am is this divine piece of the intelligence that creates all things. And it doesn't matter what you call it, whether you call it God or soul or spirit or divine mind or the Tao. It makes no difference, because, I mean, the opening line of the Tao says the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. The minute that you put a label on it, you've got two things. You've got the thing and you've got the label. You've got duality, whereas before what we're trying to do is try to understand oneness. And the only way you can understand oneness, that which cannot be divided, is to be silent. Is to, again, you can only hear by being silent, another one of the paradoxes that's in there. So moving towards God is really just sort of pushing the ego, the identification of yourself with your things and your accomplishments and your reputation, which is what we're raised to believe who we are. If you could just push that aside, and that's what Lao Tzu calls the false self, and move into the authentic self, the highest self. The highest self is that part of you that's really doing nothing but leaving nothing undone, and it's the part of you that can find deep and profound joy and peace in you. Herman Melville, when he was writing about Ahab trying to go after his purpose, which was the name of a whale, Moby Dick, he said, "For as this appalling ocean surrounds the verdant land, so in the soul of man lies one insular Tahiti, full of peace and joy, but encompassed by all of the horrors of the half-lived life." All of us have this place within us.
This half-lived life.
The half-lived life. Most of us are trying out there to do the ego rather than to do the spirit.
And we're so trapped in it. And we're going to take a little brief break here. And when we come back, Wayne has, in this book, he has done a little contemplation of all 81 verses of the Tao, and it is quite an achievement. So we'll be right back to talk more about this. This is Whitley Strieber. We're talking with Wayne Dyer, his website, drwaynedyer.com, and you can see him in any number of different places. On the 18th, he will be in Detroit, on November the 18th in Detroit, and then he's going to be finished for a while. Then he will be in Toronto in March, and in, I'm just looking, in San Francisco in April.
Right, and New York in November, and also...
Yeah, that's right. I see that. In New York City on November the 14th and the 12th, in Loveland, Colorado, and it says here you're going to be at sea on the...
That's what they tell me.
Well, I'm at sea always anyway.
I spent 4 years in the Navy. I've been resisting getting back on a boat and living on one, but they are doing a conference called I Can Do It. We're going down to Mexico, so I'm going to give it a shot.
Well, the difference between you and me is this, that I am so controversial that I would never get invited or anything like that.
I don't know about that.
Oh, yeah.
I just had a friend come over here. I just had a friend walk over here who just said hello to me, and I said, I can only spend a few minutes here. She wanted me to sign some books, and I said, because I'm going on the air. I'm doing an interview. She said, with who? And I said, Whitley Strieber. She said, oh my God, I read the Communion. And there was another book that she mentioned, The Key or something. Did you do a book called The Key?
Yeah, I did a book called The Key.
She loved that book. She thought that was like the most profound thing she'd ever read. And she said it's out of print, and she can't get a hold of it. And
no, it's going back in print, The Key.
Is it?
It will be back and available on our website in a few weeks, yeah.
But she was like your biggest fan.
Yeah, well, good. Well, perhaps I will end up on a boat.
I'd love that. We'll have to do something together.
That would be fun. Well,
Communion, I told you, Communion was one of my all-time favorite books. I mean, and if I was a skeptic before that, boy, it taught me that there's much more to this world than what we see with our eyes.
Boy, isn't there ever.
Yeah.
And But let's now go back, though. There's something I want to ask you. I had the luck when I was a young man to stumble upon a brief meeting with D.T. Suzuki, who brought Zen Buddhism to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not ask him this question, but I heard this question asked of him, and I thought I've never forgotten it. Someone in the group raised their hand and asked, "What is Zen?" And he answered, "What isn't?" And there is really a ring of connection between the Tao Te Ching and the teachings of Zen. And I wonder if you know if there, or you could talk a little bit about the bridge between the two, if this resonates with you at all.
It does, yeah. I have a T-shirt that someone sent me that said, "That was Zen and this is Tao."
Beautiful.
Yeah. But basically, what Zen was teaching, and Alan Watts was, one of the great Zen teachers, and he's written many, many books on the Tao and the Watercourse Way and so on. I don't know if you ever had a chance to meet Alan Watts.
No, I don't think so.
I didn't. He was he passed away in the early 70s. At any rate, but I have many of his lectures, and I've listened to a lot of his things. I've read almost all of it, and he was a Tao master and a Zen master. And I don't know that the distinction is important as much as what was it teaching, that there is no place that this intelligence, that this all creating source that is invisible and you can never get a hold of, there's no place that it is not. And the irony of it, and that's what Lao Tzu was teaching particularly, is that this, if there's no place that it is not, if there's no place that this source is not or God is not, then it must be in you. And if there's no place that it's not and it's in you, it also must be in everything that you ever have perceived to be missing from your life. So that if you could realign your inner world in such a way that you understood that you're already connected through this invisible intelligence called the Tao or called Zen, if you understood that, then you already know that you're already connected to everything that you perceive to be missing from your life, including the money that is missing from your life, including the right people, the right events, the right circumstances, the healing that you need. Everything that you feel yourself missing from has a connection to it. And what the Tao is really about is really realigning your thoughts in such a way so that they're always in harmony with that source, always. And that's the place that we have to learn to go. That they teach, and both Zen and the Tao teach the idea that unless the mind and the body and the spirit are equally developed and fully integrated, that you're never going to reach a spiritual peak. And this is that the only way that you can reach the highest place that you want to be in your life is to be living as God lived. I always remember Albert Einstein being asked a question, and it's like he was talking about the most important decision that you're ever going to have to make is to decide what kind of a universe do you live in. Do you live in a universe that is supportive, or do you live in a universe that is that is hostile? And if you live in a universe that is hostile, you're going to have thoughts that are going to keep you from, being able to attract into your life what you want. And all you have to do is get yourself into a way. When he was asked a question like about quantum physics, he said, "I don't even care about quantum physics and the details." He said, "It makes no difference to me." He said, "The only thing I want to do is to learn how to think like God thinks." And it was very interesting. I just did
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I did an interview with Oprah Winfrey just a couple of weeks ago in Chicago, and she asked me that question. She said, "What did taking a year out of your life and living the Tao and writing this whole thing," she said, "what did it do for you?" And I told her, I said, "I think the thing that it did more than anything else is that it taught me how to think just a little bit more, a little bit closer to how God thinks, to live from that perspective, and to be able to go to Tahiti, to go to that inner place within, that peace and joy, that place of peace and joy within myself at any time in my life." And the answers, you've seen a lot of this stuff about the gift, haven't you? I mean, the secret, rather.
Right,
the
secret,
right,
the book.
The movie and the book and all of the excitement about it. And I was asked to be a part of that thing, and one of the reasons I stayed away from it was because I think that the missing piece there is that in order for you to be able to get what you want and attract into your life what you want, you have to be in a place where you're living the virtues of the Tao. You have to be living giving, which is what God does always.
Well, you know, I think now, and I just want to bring this up because you're in the 81st verse. Sages do not accumulate anything, but give everything to others. Having more, the more they give. And your meditation on this is perfectly wonderful. The one called Living Without Accumulating.
Right.
And this is so hard in our society because we are in a world that lives by a kind of pornographic stimulation, in that this world is exquisitely skilled at stimulating human desires of all kinds, and from the most primitive desires for the arising out of our primate nature, our love of shiny things, our automobiles, our jewels, our coins, all of these shiny things, and on, even to the point where we become consumers of the no thing. And Wayne, how in the world can we escape from being consumers without trying to consume the act of escaping?
Well, that's the divine paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Taoist question.
Yes, it is. But I mean, but there is an answer to that, Whitley, and the answer to that is to stay in a place called God realization, or you know what Lao Tzu calls, you know, living the subtle self, or staying where you're acting and thinking as if you were the creator, which you are. You're a piece of this whole creative process. You must be like what you came from, and you came from this divine intelligence, and this divine intelligence is always giving. You know, it never asks any, and it doesn't ask anything of any one of us. The great poet Hafiz said that even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, "You owe me." Just think what a love like that can do. It lights up the whole world. If you could get yourself into a place where your whole being, the times that I've had the greatest miracles, I had a miracle happen for me in Assisi when I was lecturing over there in Italy. I was supposed to have a knee replaced, and I was carrying a guy up on my back who had muscular dystrophy, and he had these heavy weights, and I had to carry him up these steps because he couldn't make it. And I'd completely forgotten about my knee. I'd completely forgotten about my own safety or anything like that. I just picked this guy up because he couldn't do it, and strapped him over my back and carried him up 3 flights of stairs. And in that moment, my knee went down, and I thought I was going to collapse, and I went straight back up, and I've never had a problem with that knee again. Never. And it's like it was a miracle of miracles for me, because I had to wear a brace wherever and it happened in a moment. I used to think it happened because I was there lecturing about St. Francis and I was doing all of this sort of thing, but it wasn't because of that at all. It was because I was in the total space of just giving and allowing and offering and judging no one, and being in a place of kindness and a place of gentleness and a place of peace and a place of love, but supremely in it, almost to the extreme in it. And I have found that when I'm like that, when that's how I conduct my life, when I think of others before I think of myself, when I don't think about how much money I'm going to make or how well it's going to go or what people are going to think of me, when I really am suspending that, especially when I'm on stage and lecturing or when I'm traveling, that abundance flows into my life in numbers so big I don't even know what to do with it, and I just keep circulating and not attached to it. And it's like teaching people this idea that it is through giving and offering and providing and being in that place of non-interference, in that place of love and non-judgment. When you get into that space and live it fully every single day, you know, as Patanjali put it, he said, when you are steadfast, that means you never slip. When you're steadfast in your abstention of thoughts of harm directed towards yourself and others, then all living creatures, he said, will cease to feel fear in your presence. That's all the animals, that's all the trees, that's all the people, that's all the babies, that's all everything, when you're steadfast in abstaining from thoughts of harm directed towards yourself and others. It means no judgment, only just accepting and allowing and loving, and sitting down with those who we have conflicts with rather than trying to destroy them. Then everything will begin to flow into your life. That's, to me, the great lesson of the Tao Te Ching.
You know, it's fascinating that you speak in this particular way after mentioning a miracle taking place at Assisi, because, of course, these could be the words of St. Francis themselves.
Yes.
It's really something.
That's so true. Where there is hatred, let me bring love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. Where there's darkness, light.
And on that note, we're going to take a little break. Wayne's book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And this is true wisdom. True, folks. Very true. We'll be right back. This is Whitley Strieber, and we are talking to Dr. Wayne Dyer. His website, drwaynedyer.com. You can see Dr. Wayne Dyer. He appears often in many different places, and you can find out where on his website. Listen to his energy and think of what it's like to be with him in person. It would be well worth doing. We were talking, and this is usual on this program, we end up talking about the very last part of the book rather than the first, but suffice to say, there isn't a single page in here that is without value, but there is a particular thing. We're going to be, I want to pursue the idea of nothing in nothingness a little bit further, because I know we're all hungry for this particular knowledge. A lot of the people who listen to this program are pretty advanced in terms of spiritual seeking. And so in your comment on the 81st verse, you bring up one of the most remarkable things that Meister Eckhart ever said, which it was one of the things that has always made me suspect that Meister Eckhart at the Sorbonne was influenced. There were Buddhists moving about in Paris at the time, and I think he was very influenced by them. In any case, he said this: God is a being beyond being and a nothingness beyond being. God is nothing, no thing. God is nothingness, and yet God is something. Wayne, what exactly is this something?
The somethingness is the elusive oneness that is so difficult for us to comprehend because we try to do it with our mind. And the reason that it becomes impossible with our minds is because the minute that our minds get involved and the intellect becomes absorbed in trying to process this, we have to come up with labels of some kind. We need words, we need symbols, we need something in order to convey it. It's why, Pascal said that all of man's troubles stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And that silence, that you can only hear through silence. And silence is like the great God's one and only voice is silence, said Melville. So what we do is we try to do all of this through the intellect, through thinking it out. But every time we have a thought, we have a symbol about something. And now we've got duality. We've got two-ness instead of oneness. Oneness is very much like zero. You can cut zero in half and you still have zero. You can cut it in half again and again and again, because there's no dividing that which is no thingness, and zero is necessary in all mathematics. So the equivalent, that what Eckhart is speaking about here is that the nothingness that we want, you're going to only get through your feeling. You're going to get through the meditation. You're going to get through the process of getting quiet and pushing out all of these thoughts and going to that place of Tahiti, that internal place within yourself. And the minute that you're able to, or the second that you're able to get into that place, you'll have an awareness of it, and then you'll start to process it. And the minute that you try to process it, you've lost it. That's why he says the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. And it also says somewhere in the Tao Te Ching that those who know do not speak, and those who speak do not know. And the paradox of that is those who know do not speak. They know that you cannot speak about this, because the minute that you speak about it, you've lost it. And so those who are speaking about it and trying to explain it don't really know. And those who really know it realize that trying to explain it to anyone else or put a symbol on it or a division on it, then you go into duality. And it's the difference, the somethingness that you're speaking about is oneness. But how do you get to oneness? How do you get to that place of oneness? Because we identify ourselves on the basis of our stuff and our bodies and all of that, and all of that is about two-ness. I mean, you could never have a concept of good without a concept of bad. You could never have a concept of male unless you have a female, unless there's a dichotomy there. And even in the Bhagavad Gita, they're constantly teaching us to transcend these dichotomies and to move into that place where you are one. And the best you can do with that, as long as you're incarnated into a body and in an ego, the best you can do with that is to begin to see the unfolding of God in everyone and everything and every creature that exists, any place. If you can just begin to see that, and once we started doing that, that's why Lao Tzu says that then war and hatred and revenge and all of the kinds of things that are so much a part of our everyday life would no longer even be able to exist if we could really just practice and begin to live the Tao. And the way you'll get it, there's a great line in A Course in Miracles. It's Jesus speaking, and as God, and saying to the multitude, saying to people, if you want to be like me, I will help you knowing that we are alike. If you want to be different than me, he says, I will wait until you change your mind. And you will change your mind. You may have to die in order to do it, but when you die and you understand and experience oneness, then I will be there. I will help you. So it's very interesting. And we could talk about it forever, but getting a hold of it is something that you have to do in silence. You have to do it in silence. And when you go there and you get into the gap, get into that place of peace and joy, and when you know it, like I spent a year, Whitley, on the Tao, living it, and not just writing about it, but living about it. I hardly even wrote this. I let all of this write itself. It all wrote itself through me. It was all Lao Tzu really speaking through me. But in that year, what I learned how to do was to I didn't even learn it. It just became my way of being. No more judgment, no more anguish, no more stress, no more apologies, and being closer and closer to nature, feeling the exquisite excitement of spending an hour in a spider web, or being out with the dolphins in the ocean, or listening to the whales, or even just being with a palm tree. It's like I found God in nature. I really, literally found, and I found my own nature as well, and I live a life of just complete serenity and peace now, and it's really because of the great wisdom in the Tao.
Nature is a song that we cannot hear being sung. And in the 29th...
Oh, that's beautiful. Did you write that?
It just came out of me now.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's a good title for something.
We'll have to remember it.
Say it again. Nature is a song that we cannot hear.
We cannot hear being sung.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't hear nature. And, well, it was inspired, actually, by your book, because in the 29th verse, you have a commentary on it called Living by Natural Law. And the 29th verse, folks, it starts out, do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe that it can be done. Now, we are in a place in our world, and you can hear the backhoes roaring and watch the buildings going up and the oceans of automobiles and the great masses of goods pouring out of India and China and the United States, Western Europe, Japan, the gushing geyser of improvements that we make that are our life and our world. That's what it is. And yet the Master says he does not believe it can be done. And Wayne, can you comment on this? Because we do seem to be coming to a kind of a climax where nature is actually going to be telling us, folks, Tao Tzu was right and you're wrong. You're just going to have to accept the fact that 2 and 2 is 4, not 4 and a half.
That's right. It's like trying to slow down the global warming by stopping cows from farting or something. I mean, there's just I always say we could take this whole planet and we could and we're trying to do that anyway. And we could pave over the whole planet, like get enough cement to cover everything. Every piece of land out there could be finely covered, and my answer to that is that nature always bats last. You know, they always get their last at bat. They're always the home team.
Yes.
So that if one blade of grass manages through one seed manages to stick up between the concrete someplace, it'll start all over again. You know that nature indeed will take over. And if we could understand, not only is nature like this thing that we are connected to at all times, like the air and the atmosphere, you know, and the water that we breathe and so on, but beyond that, Whitley, we all have a nature. We have our own nature, and we are part of the nature of the creation of life on this planet. We are a piece of that. We are all a piece of God, and we have a nature. And we came into this incarnation, into this place that we are in, with with a design, with a destiny, with something that we were to accomplish. And it isn't a thing that we are to, but it's like to be able to experience heaven on earth, to really know that whatever we think of as heaven in the world of formlessness is available to us. That earth's crammed with heaven, and every burning bush is a fire with God. You know, that's Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And those who truly know, she said, take off their shoes, while the rest sit around and pick blackberries. She was great.
We're going to have to take a little break, and
okay.
You know, these breaks seem like they come about every 3 seconds when I'm talking to you.
It's going very fast.
It really, you realize we've been talking for 36 minutes.
No, I can't.
It's unbelievable, Wayne. It seems like about 4 minutes, and when we get back, we're going to explore something that is deeply inculcated in this marvelous book, in change your thought, change your life, and that is trust, and what trust is, and how trust and surrender are so intimately involved together. They're like dancers. We'll be right back. We're talking to Dr. Wayne Dyer. His website, drwaynedyer.com, excuse me. That's drwaynedyer.com. On it, you can find out about his many activities, and you should not miss seeing Wayne Dyer in person, because the energy that you see on public television and that comes leaping out of his books and out of Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life is very extraordinary in a face-to-face situation. And now, when we left the air, I wanted to bring up the idea of trust, and this is, I don't think it's too directly mentioned in the book, but it's in everything. And our difficulty is that because we don't trust nothing, we try to control everything, Wayne. We just can't let go. It feels like we're clinging to a ledge, and if we let go, we will lose everything, when in fact, I think if we don't let go, we will lose everything.
Yeah, that's so well said. There's a little book called Tao Te Ching, The Unknown Teachings of Lao Tzu, and he said that in order to get to this place of trust, he says that this is the only way to gain the attention of the immortals who teach the methods of energy enhancement and integration that are necessary to reach the divine realm, is to become, to restore the qualities of your being through virtue and service. It is always through virtue and service that you're going to find your trust. And these teachers cannot be sought out. It is they who seek out the students. They seek us out. So that if you want to experience the trust and I'm speaking about trust in a really big way, knowing that there is an invisible intelligence that is doing nothing. You can never get a hold of it, and leaving everything just exactly the way it's supposed to be. Just nothing is left undone. You know, the sun comes up every day, the flowers open, the rain comes. We get worried about, a drought here or a hurricane there and so on. And when we step back and see a bigger picture, just like where you are out in California, these fires, and you hear everybody talking about the horror, and isn't this something that shouldn't be happening? And how can we have trust when our homes are burnt down, and yet fires have been the ways of of nature as long as there's been nature, you know. And it's like I remember being on a tour in Sedona in one of those little jeeps, and they said that without the forest fires, there could be no forest. You know, if there wasn't this clearing thing, that everything would just grow and everything would just choke on itself, wouldn't it? So that, you know, it's almost like the trust that you want is a trust in a divine intelligence that knows what it's doing. For 2 years, we've had no hurricanes down in Florida, you know, and everybody's really celebrating in Florida in hurricanes. But Georgia is about to run out of water, you know, and so is South Carolina and North Carolina, because these hurricanes that come along and dump, you know, a full lake's worth of water in a couple of days, which is enough water to supply it. When that is off, when it gets out of balance, that all of these things that are happening out there, including the global warming, including all of it, that there is an intelligence behind all of this that we need to be aware of and not be living so much of our lives in fear and belief that some horrible catastrophe is about to overtake us through nature. It's not going to happen through nature. If it does, it's going to be happening because we don't have the trust that all of us are one. You know, as the Native Americans say, that no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. If we could get that and just see the unfolding of God in everyone, every place on this planet, if we could do that, the trust that we need would come from our living the virtues of kindness and gentleness and reverence for all of life and love for each other. That's all we have to do. That's all we have to do. It's really quite simple.
In 1906, my great-grandmother built a house in Texas, and in the archway between the living room and the dining room, she embossed in brass the words from Robert Browning's Fifth of Passes, "God's in his heaven, all's right with the world."
Mm.
And I always used to ask, how could that be true when there were Nazis? And she would say, it is always true. It is always true. And I resonated deeply when I came to the 26th verse and your comments about living calmly.
Mm.
Why should the lord of the country flit about like a fool? If you let yourself be blown to and fro, you lose touch with your root. To be restless is to lose one's self-mastery, and this idea that we really can't make things wrong. We can't do it.
It's so true, and it's very hard for us, because when we see things like Holocausts and we see things like storms, and we see people losing their homes with fire and all of this kind of thing, and we see AIDS and
Yes.
and children suffering, and these endless kinds of things that are a part of what living on this planet is about. That there's, as hard as that is for us to understand, that there's a perfection to that. There's a perfection to it, and also at the same time, simultaneously, the paradox is there's also a perfection in your desire to end those things, and that's what you have to go with. That's what you go. You don't tell yourself this shouldn't be happening. Isn't this awful? And and blame it on God. You say, I have a thought inside of me that's just as real as an AIDS virus, and that thought inside of me says, I would like to do something to make sure that children do not suffer, and that diseases are wiped out, and that people's homes are protected, and on and on and on. And you go with that. You go with that rather than cursing the darkness or cursing what's going on out there outside of you. Instead, you reach down within yourself, and you go to that place within that says, I'm listening to myself, and I'm listening to the highest place of myself. And the highest place, the 40th verse of the Tao Te Ching, is the shortest verse of the Tao, and yet it's probably the most important and the most profound. And I don't even have it in front of me, but it says that the way of Tao, here it is, returning is the motion of the Tao. Yielding is the way of the Tao. The 10,000 things are born of being, and being is born of non-being. That everything in the physical world comes from non-being, comes from spirit, comes from an invisibleness. And that we get a return trip here. We get a round-trip ticket when we come in here. And we're all on our way returning back to our source, returning back to the God force from which we all come. If you could learn to do that without having to die, if you could just return and get yourself on that return motion, so that you're having an awareness that there is something to trust in, and that there is something that is grander, and that inch by inch, we as a people are going to figure it out. If we don't, we'll do what Einstein said. He said, I don't know what weapons they'll use to fight World War III. He said, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. We'll
yes, that was a memorable quote.
Yes, right.
I don't think that this is a stretch, but you take me in your words to the 78th verse, and your comment, when you reach into the river and try to squeeze it tight, you end up losing it all. Water is elusive until you cease grasping and let your hand relax and be one with it. And Wayne, I thought that was such an extraordinary way of saying the how that is implicit in doing nothing.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
It is. It really is. And there's about 40 references to water in the Tao Te Ching, and all of nature, including that nature cannot create a storm that lasts forever, but that water is that invisibleness that, we can't get a hold of. The more you try to grasp it, the least you get it. And he urges all of us to become like the sea. Observe the sea, the most powerful force on the planet. Why is it the most powerful force on the planet? Why is it that all of the rivers and all of the streams flow to it? Because it is patient and it is low. It stays low. It is humble. He's saying, don't just be low. Think in those kinds of ways. Place yourself low and let everything come to you rather than you being out there trying to change everyone, trying to fix everything. And he also, probably the most famous line, Whitley, of the Tao Te Ching is that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. He says over and over again, don't think big, which is what everybody's out there trying to tell us. Don't think big. Don't think big. Don't have big ideas. Think small and accomplish big things. Like I just celebrated 3 days ago my 20th anniversary of not having any alcohol in my body, 20 years. And that's big. It was big for me because I drank every day, and I haven't had a drink in 20 years. But I accomplished that not by quitting drinking for 20 years, but by doing it just one single step at a time. Be in the moment, as my friend Ram Dass would say, be here now. Be there in the moment. Do what you can now, and great things will then get accomplished.
Give up the sainthood, renounce wisdom, and it will be 100 times better for everyone.
Yep, that's Lao Tzu. That's so beautiful.
Living without attachment.
Right, precisely. Yes. Yeah, and that's one of the big things. We're all attached, aren't we? We're all attached to our stuff and our belief that we are, whatever we accumulate and what other people think of us and whatever achievements we have and whatever awards we have, when in fact you came from a place that doesn't have anything like that, and you're returning to that as well. Why not live in that spiritual way, while you're here? That's what Lao Tzu was offering us in the Tao Te Ching.
My wife a couple of years ago came very close to death, and she had a near-death experience, and in this, she found herself in a waiting room, like a airline or train bus station, and everyone was there, was loaded with luggage, and no one was going anywhere, and it was enormously valuable to her because the feeling of release, of giving up those attachments, and the importance of doing that, because folks, we're made to fly, and
you're right.
You can't fly if you've got your pockets full of bricks.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
When I came to that year, I wrote this book in 2000, the entire year of 2006. I spent the entire year on just practicing the Tao. But what I did before that, I didn't even realize why I was doing it. I left everything that I'd accumulated up until that time. Everything. Every book I had, all of my records, all photographs, all my clothes, my furniture, my shoes, everything. I turned the key, locked it, told my secretary to sell the place and give everything else away. And I came over to Maui and lived 1 year on the Tao. And it was one of the freest things I've ever done in my life. Just
absolutely amazing. And folks, you can feel that in this remarkable book. Change your thoughts, change your life. living the wisdom of the Tao. He has done the impossible. He has squared the circle because he has touched the Tao. The Tao is hidden and nameless. The Tao alone nourishes and brings everything to fulfillment. A man wise in the ways of not being wise, indeed. Wayne Dyer, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, my friend. God bless you. And give my love to your wife as well.
Oh, I sure will, and you to all of your family.
Thank you, sir. God bless you, Whitley.
This is Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. Next up, Linda Moulton Howe.
This week, EarthFiles.com's Linda Moulton Howe returns to the subject of animal mutilations. She's got a number of new reports, and they are very disturbing. Here she is from Albuquerque, Dreamland's own Emmy Award-winning science reporter and EarthFiles.com's ace news editor, Linda Moulton Howe.
Well, thanks, Whitley. Bizarre animal deaths continue to make the news. On November 6th, Charles and Linda Everson were driving back to their hotel near Manson in Washington State when a 600-pound rodeo cow fell out of the sky and landed on the front of their van, denting it badly, but leaving the lucky couple unhurt. Ironically, the Eversons had been out celebrating their first wedding anniversary. Chelan County Sheriff Sergeant Mike Harris said the animal was a professional bull rider registered cow that had apparently escaped its ranch about 1 month ago, had been out wandering, and apparently fell from the top of the 200-foot-high cliff above the highway. Now, that's not technically a mutilated animal, but the circumstances are so bizarre, and today no one knows precisely how did that cow get to the top of that cliff and end up propelled out into the air so that it dropped for 200 feet, they estimate, right on to the van on the freeway. Well, only 4 days before that, on November 2nd, in Todd County, Minnesota, northwest of Minneapolis, a pet horse was found dead and mutilated in a way that reminded me of the famous Colorado mutilated horse back in September 1967. That was found stripped of flesh from the neck up. Todd County Sheriff Pete Mickelson said about this recent horse that its skull had been skinned, one eyeball had been removed, and that the killing was, quote, very strange, unquote, from the sheriff's point of view. Since 2006, the Minneapolis-St. Paul region has had a string of unusual animal deaths, including the beheadings of a bird, a cat, and a dog. And another bizarre beheading was reported on October 10th, 2007, in Delavan, Wisconsin, northwest of Chicago. Walworth County Sheriff's deputies are trying to figure out who or what cut the head off of a 5-day-old alpaca in southern Wisconsin. The owner, Tana Ward, found her missing 17-pound baby alpaca in her family's pasture with its head severed. No blood. At first, she thought maybe it was a coyote, but there were no bites, no scratch marks, nothing, just the head removed from the baby's body. Police determined that the head was severed cleanly without blood, and they are puzzled because alpacas have breeding and fur value, but the alpaca head is not known for any use. Investigators so far have no suspects, witnesses, or motive. And this past week, I received an email with color photographs from Guy Sr. and Elsie Mills in Ansley, Nebraska. On October 27th, their son and ranch partner, Guy Mills Jr., discovered one of their finest 8-month-old heifers dead and mutilated. Her left ear and left eyeball, along with the eyelids, had been cleanly excised without blood. The tongue was also removed, along with the lips and the jaw flesh. The heifer's udder had been cut out, hide deep only, in an oval pattern. Her rectal and vaginal tissues had also been cut very cleanly and precisely away, only hide deep, leaving an oval pattern. Her tail had been removed at the base of the heifer's spine. Only 2 months before that, on August 31st, 2007, the Mills found one of their big, valuable bulls dead and mutilated in the same pasture as the heifer. That bull's penis and testicles had been removed only hide deep in a perfect small circle. This is one of the most precise I have ever seen, and I have photographs of this mutilated bull at my news website, earthfiles.com. At the top of my headlines page is this report about the cattle mutilations in Ansley, Nebraska, that shows how precisely and without blood tissue was removed from this August 31st, 2007 bull. In addition to the penis and testicles, the bull's right ear and right eye had been excised. Right above the removed eye was also an excision only hide deep in the shape of a half circle. That was a very common finding in cattle mutilations throughout North America in the 1970s. The tongue had been removed from deep inside the throat, and the upper and lower front lips were cut cleanly away. Guy Mills Sr. and Jr. looked all around the bull's body for tracks, signs of struggle, for any evidence, and they could find nothing. The father and son told me this week that they feel scared and haunted because they lost another bull a year ago in June 2006 the same eerie way. Guy Sr. had gone out at 5:30 in the morning to turn on the water hydrant for his cattle because there was a severe drought. And that's when he saw the bull down on the ground. Guy said the animal was still warm to touch, and its jugular vein on the neck was bubbling blood. That means that the animal had just been killed, and the August 31st animal, they estimated, had been dead only about 24 hours when they found that body. But this is so fresh that blood, a little blood, was coming from a hole in the bull's neck. Guy immediately dialed 911 on his cell phone to the Sherman County, Nebraska Sheriff's Department. Deputies arrived and confirmed bloodless excisions of the bull's left ear, left eye with a crescent of flesh removed high deep above that eye. The tongue was gone. The lips were gone. The penis and testicles had been neatly removed, and the rectum was cored out in that bull. The two bulls and recent heifer together were valued at about $10,000, and the Mills had no insurance on those animals. But more than the money, Guy Mills Sr. and Jr. want to know who or what has killed and mutilated their valuable animals, and about a dozen more in their county over the past couple of years. In fact, Guy Mills Jr., now 48 years old, has ranched all his life with his 78-year-old father. And in April of 2006, he was out planting corn with his neighbor the night before a cow was found dead and mutilated on the neighbor's land. What the two ranchers saw that April 2006 evening was unlike anything either had ever seen in their ranching experiences, and Guy Mills Jr. thinks it was related to whatever did the mutilation.
We were out planting one night, come very, very close to catching whatever it was. I have one of these GPS things on my tractor, you use a satellite. Well, you collect data, for harvest data, but another offshoot of it is that I can put it on my planner, and I get perfect rows, day or night. So I thought, well, let's go try it out in the night. Let's have some fun. It was in April of 2006. All right, the moon was full that night, and we were out there planting. And we were on this one pivot that was the way that the topography is in this area was about 150 feet above, probably, or 120 above what you would call the floodplain. We got up on top of the hill in the middle of the night. My friend and I stopped and we visited. We seen these exceedingly bright lights. It was a white light unlike nothing I'd ever seen. And I thought, well, my gosh, my neighbor's got a cow in trouble, Dwayne Christensen. He's out there pulling a calf. And I said, but, boy, both of us said, we wish we had these things. I'm going to get them, put on my calving barn or whatever. I said, I've never seen such lights. And he is a licensed electrician himself. I thought maybe he'd got something. We went on to find out the next morning that he'd had one of his cows mutilated, and that would have been in April of '06. But I mean, we were about a mile and probably a half away from those lights.
And did you hear any sound at all?
No, it was no sound, and we were just up on this hill. We'd stopped in the tractors running, just visiting, and they were, I mean, it's such a brilliant, it's hard to describe because I had never seen anything like it before, but the white light was such brilliance that I thought, my gosh, and we both remarked about that.
Could you hear any of the cattle bawling? No,
none of the cattle. It was quiet. Nothing bawling that night. Of course, the tractors were running, and we were visiting, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. It was, I would say, a relatively quiet evening. His wife, who's now passed away, talked to my mother the next morning and basically said, well, they took the udder and those sorts of things.
No blood, no tracks?
No blood, no tracks. No, but I tell you, though, Linda, we were probably as close to finding out what was doing it as anybody, and it was just by accident. This is expensive. I don't have insurance on these bulls.
Nobody ever does.
And it's expensive, and you add up the $9,400 on the bulls, and the value of that heifer calf, I would say probably today's about $550, so that's approaching $10,000, and that's a lot of money, to take out your business. I visited with 3 law enforcement departments, the Sherman County Sheriff, and I made statements to their office, the Custer County Sheriff, and the Nebraska State Patrol located in Grand Island. And I said, had this been considered a crime, and had it been a local store, the gas station robbed for $9,400, I said it would have been all over it, and you'd have had all kinds of cars out there, and they would have found it. And I said, now it's my bull. We know we're taxpayers. This is our livelihood. They're messing with it, and it's been some tough years with the drought and everything, and $9,400 is a lot to take out of your business. And I said I felt that it should be followed in a more disciplined approach, using something where they can use science to find out exactly what is killing it. If it takes soil samples, that's great. If it takes a necropsy on the animal, that would be great. I would thought that, and I said, get the Nebraska Cattlemen Association involved. I said, there's money available. I said, we'll all put money into it, to help on these, explorations to find out using science, to dispel any emotion that we can find out exactly what killed them. And, it takes a lot to take a 2,000-pound bull down. And I was telling all these guys this. We've worked around cattle all of our lives, and you just don't knock them down right away. I said, we got to find out what the cause of death was. And I said, just use a complete science-based approach to it.
And what did they say?
Well, they thought that was a great idea, but I have not heard back from them. But I did talk to this State Patrol officer in Arcadia there. He told me I could talk to this Ida. She was a lady who basically her job is to investigate these sorts of things.
You requested that there be some kind of formal and scientific investigation of your mutilated heifer, but to date, as we're talking on the night of November 5th, 2007, you have not had any follow-up from any law enforcement or veterinarian?
None. Since I started in June of 2006, I made complaint of it, and then the one in August, I really complained hard.
On the bull?
On the bull, the second bull. I said, hey, you guys have got to do something, and they haven't done anything. Some people are going to say, well, it's a coyote. Well, animals die of everything in our close to 130 years in this area. Anything imaginable we've had cattle die of. And yes, coyotes do certain things, but this isn't a coyote or it isn't any predator. And I said, let's just find out what the facts are.
And what did law enforcement say to you about other mutilations that they had knowledge about?
Well, this one state patrolman said his dad owned a ranch. He knew all about it, and he said, yes, I do believe it. My own ranch, so we've seen it on our own property. So they are, in a large respect, reluctant, and I don't know for sure why, because I consider it a crime. I consider it, in the state of Nebraska, it's a felony, anything past $600, and I told them that. And I made reference to some kids who shot some deer, and they threw the book at them. Mm-hmm. Like 10 deer, some high school kids just got in a prank in a contest, and they made a big to-do about it in the district court. And I said, okay, they shot a few deer out of season, but I said, hey, my bulls are here. And, I mean, you know, this is what everybody in this area depends on for their livelihood and their income, and yet no one has come out and investigated it.
How many animals do you think have been mutilated in the Ansley, Nebraska area over the last couple of years?
A lot more than what people say. And I know that because I've heard, you know, the employees of different ranches, you know, everybody's kind of keeping it hushed up. One of them was a friend of mine. He's a bank director, and they buried it. They said we're not gonna talk about it but it's a lot more than what people let on.
Would you say it is a dozen?
Oh, absolutely, more than that. I know of our neighbor. We got 3. Our neighbor's got 1. Is 4. Our other neighbor's got 2. And I mean, this is within 6-7 miles, and then you go down 2 more miles, and then there's another one there.
That's 7.
7. So within a small radius. So a dozen in a county. So our county's 90 miles across. So it's definitely more than that.
Right. And why is it that you think that everybody wants to cover up these bloodless, trackless animal mutilations?
You know, that's an absolute excellent question, and I don't have an answer other than I think it's the culture. You know, if you go counterculture on anything, whether you're a war activist or anything, you get labeled as a nut. And I think there's a lot of that in law enforcement, and I think there's a lot of that. You're no longer a conformist. If you're a farmer and you stand up and say, okay, and I'm gutless too, or I'd have put my name in the paper. I admit, I don't know a complete answer to that. I can't answer your question for sure.
And as long as people are silent and bury the animals and don't report them and don't demand that necropsies be done, then the subject remains in a kind of darkness.
Yes, it does. I got to the point, though, enough's enough, you know, and it's just too expensive anymore to buy these kind of bulls and have something, and it's really bothered my family members, and, you know, there's a lot more questions out there than answers.
Did the state patrol officer or anybody in any of the sheriff's offices ever suggest to you that extraterrestrial biological entities are responsible and that that's why they won't do anything?
No, he didn't.
If this is what is behind the global animal mutilation phenomena that is bloodless and trackless and taking the same parts and excisions, what can law enforcement or governments do?
Well, if that was true, that would have to be one of the most, what would you say, significant findings in all of civilization. I mean, ever since Jesus walked the earth, can you think of anything, I mean, if you had proof of that would be more profound than anything that has ever happened in mankind? And why they do this, I don't know. I really, truly don't.
Right. Well, let's assume that the military people are telling the truth, that have said, yes, we're dealing with extraterrestrial biological entities, and what you just said is probably true, that the physical evidence of the mutilated animals in the northern and southern hemisphere is the largest body of physical evidence of interaction and interference by a non-human presence.
Well, I don't know.
The military monitors. The government knows this is going on, but they can't stop it. That's why they have a policy of denial.
Okay. Well, what in the world would they want out of, well, I don't want to be too graphic, but what would they want with my bull's penis?
It's a very good question, and the only answer that I've ever gotten from people in military and intelligence working for this government and talking to me off the record has been a genetic harvest. And when I've asked, what is the genetic harvest for, they say, we don't really know. And in addition to the puzzle and mystery of why a genetic harvest, one of the characteristics of the worldwide animal mutilations that I've noticed in the last 28 years since I began trying to get to the bottom of it is the same pastures. There, in this case, in Ansley, Nebraska, it's 3 animals between June of 2006 and October of 2007, all three in the same pasture. And it reminded me very much of how many times when I was doing a Strange Harvest and Strange Harvest 1993, 2 television programs, that I would hear ranchers tell me the mutilations keep happening in the same pasture, near the same creek, near the same something. And one year, a man named Mr. Blazing Game had a ranch around the Colorado Springs area, and he called me up, and he said, Linda, I want you to know, I've had those 4 mutilations the past 4 years on that hill pasture. He said, well, this year, for the first time ranching, I didn't put a single animal up on that hill, and this is the first year in 5 years I haven't had any mutilated animals. What would there be about a geographic consistency? Is there some kind of an electromagnetic grid that is being applied to the earth in a way that we cannot understand, but might explain why certain ranchers, certain areas of the world are consistently the target of the animal mutilators?
Well, Linda, I think that, I go back to an incident that occurred in South Texas some years ago when we received a telephone call from a rancher who had been trying to get the MUFON group to respond, and they had not responded to him at all. And so I took Dr. William Mallow from Southwest Research and a couple of other researchers, along with magnetometers and other equipment, down to this man's ranch because he reported that there was a circle in an area where he was feeding cattle. It was a dirt circle that was extremely mysterious. But what made it mysterious was that the cattle were out of control in an odd way. They would all stand with their heads in the circle, all around the circle, and he'd have to keep getting his dogs to pull them away because they wouldn't feed. And we found that this circle was indeed electromagnetic. And here's what's so odd. Where was the electromagnetism coming from?
Right.
There wasn't, or any magnet. It was just magnetic. I misspeak myself when I say electromagnetic. It was magnetic. And there was no apparent source for this magnetism at all. And I was using the magnetometer and moving around inside the circle, taking measurements, and I suddenly found myself so sapped of energy that I was really afraid I was dying, and I was all I could do to straggle back to the car, and I slept for the rest of the day.
Right. And that is a description quite often in the crop circle mystery.
Yes.
And we don't have this direct landing of anything large in fields associated with the crop circles. There are those small lights. But magnetometers, when they have been taken into some of the crop formations over the years, have registered a presence of a magnetic field. And W.C. Levengood, the biophysicist, is convinced that whatever is transferring the energy is coming with this spinning plasma vortex from high in the atmosphere coming down, and there are magnetic lines that squeeze plasmas. That's how they've been photographed by NASA, and that there is this interaction between the charged plasmas and the electromagnetic fields when the plants are hit by this energy.
Right.
And that might explain the magnetic field.
My point is that the magnetic fields, as far as cattle are concerned, might be like a sort of trap. In other words, what was on that hill was one of these fields, and it would attract the cattle into it. And we kept them far enough away from it, they didn't go into it, and the trap was never sprung, and they were never taken.
Well, that is an interesting idea. And on the other side of it is, what if there is a invisible magnetic grid that the non-humans are using for some reason to keep coming back to the same animals in the same geographic areas of the world?
Well, Linda, in the close encounter experience also, there is a profound geographic aspect to it. I know that when I moved from upstate New York to Texas, after 11 years of not daily, but almost daily, and finally in the last 3 or 4 years, literally daily close encounters, it ended. It ended after a few fits and starts in Texas, but essentially it ended.
Right.
And it was as if I had left their territory.
Yeah.
At least of the guys that were interested in me.
Yeah, just like the rancher not putting any animals on one hilltop.
Exactly. Well, Linda, it's it's so disturbing because have you ever? I think you have, because I think you've interviewed on this show before. Just remind us: are there any law enforcement personnel who will deal with this in a rational way? Because these guys working out in these places like that, they know perfectly well it's not a coyote doing this. They know it for certain.
That's right.
Of course they do.
Yes, and when now deceased John Altschiller, pathologist and hematologist, and I were invited by the Colorado Sheriff's Association to do a presentation on our medical and physical evidence before all of the sheriffs and deputies in the state of Colorado. This was about 10 years ago. And after we made our presentation, which was largely medical and then largely biophysical, biochemical, soil and plant studies, afterward, I must have had 20 different sheriffs and deputies come to me quietly, take a hold of my shoulder or my hand, and say, Miss Howe, we know that you are reporting the truth. We know that we're not dealing with satanic cults, predators, or disease. We know that we're dealing with something from outer space. And when they would say those last words, they were always leaning forward in a kind of whisper. Because
and that is what this culture has done with this. And,
exactly.
I always say there's all of this knowledge left lying on the ground that we're not even bothering to pick up in our arrogance and in our blindness. And, boy, is that ever true. These are people who are afraid of losing their jobs. They are afraid, in some cases, of their government. They are certainly afraid of being laughed at by the media. And so are scientists, and no scientist will ever touch the wonderful wellspring of knowledge that this is, whatever the negative or positive implications of that, we don't know.
But I'm not afraid to keep going, and I will continue to report.
Well, Linda, you are all alone out here, you and a few others. Leslie Keene comes to mind, a few other professionals, in media professionals, who are willing to do this, and thank goodness and thank you for doing this, because without you, Linda, the light would turn out. It would literally turn out.
Yeah, I know. It's really ironic to realize how few of us are paying attention to what could be the most important subjects beyond sex, politics, and war.
Well, certainly beyond politics and war. Linda, thank you so much, folks, and everyone. Thank you for listening. It's been a great show. I loved Wayne Dyer, and as always, Linda Moulton Howe's report was mind-opening, in this case scary and sobering, and also absolutely unique.
Something like the Lord's Prayer, and like the first word of the Lord's Prayer is our, and then the next word is Father. So when you say our, and then Father, and then you go back after Father into the gap in your mind. Just go back between the word Father and the word, and when you enter into that gap, and you're doing the japa meditation, you will feel what they call, what scientists call a serotonin rush. But what that really is just the mind is just creating that feel-good enzyme, which is really the same thing as the feel-God enzyme, because the difference between good and God is just one little zero.
Interesting. You know, we have a new baby in our family, and not my wife and I, but our son and his wife have a...
Oh, congratulations,
Oh,
Grandpa.
Thanks.
Yeah.
They have a little tiny infant. He's just 3 weeks old, and he's beginning to make sounds that reminded me a lot of the sounds, of those sounds, that ha sound as he struggles. I mean, he's also making some somewhat more familiar sounds, too. You know, roaring away when something goes slightly wrong.
Well, it's very interesting that you use that as an example, because Lao Tzu said that if you want the perfect representation of a Tao master, then you must find an infant. And this is
interesting.
This is a being like in the first 9 months of our life. Lao Tzu says, none of us are doing anything throughout our whole lives. We're just all being done. And in the first 9 months of our lives, we're all being done. Nobody looks at inside and says, "Oh my God, I hope my nose shows up on time and in the right place," and all of that. There's an intelligence that is invisible, that is animating everything and allowing everything, and it's an intelligence that's doing nothing. You can't see it, you can't get a hold of it, yet, as Lao Tzu said, it leaves nothing undone. So in those first 9 months, there's just this total, complete surrendering process, and everything that's needed for this journey is surrendered to, and you just allow. You just allow, you just allow. And then we're born, and we're surrounded by people who say, "That was really nice work, God. Now we'll take over from here."
Yes.
And in the process of taking over, we create this ego where we edge God out of our...
I'm very pleased and proud to have with us a legendary figure, Dr. Wayne Dyer, who has been with us on Dreamland and created some of the most memorable experiences that any of us have ever had on this program. He was with us for an extraordinary book, Getting in the Gap. He has been with us, I think there are 2 Wayne Dyer interviews available in the subscriber section so that you can get into this in some of these extraordinary interviews that we have had in the past. Of course, he almost needs no introduction. Dr. Wayne Dyer is renowned in the world. You've seen him certainly on PBS. He's the author of over 30 books. He is also out there to an amazing, tireless degree. And if you go to his website, drwaynedyer.com, you will find out that he's liable to be in your area more or less at any time. This is a man with a tremendous and extraordinary mission, a mission that has taken him out into the world in a way that few people ever go. And this time he is back with us with something truly remarkable, a real treasure, a new book called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And you know what the Tao Te Ching is, of course, the great and incredible work by Lao Tzu that's 2,500 years old. And it is a daunting task to understand, but Wayne has literally transformed it for us. And Wayne, I'm so proud to welcome you to this program.
Thank you, Whitley. It's great to be back with you. You sound terrific, too.
Well, so do you. Of course, I believe you're out there on Hawaii. Why wouldn't you sound terrific?
I am in Maui, yes.
Yes, I am in Santa Monica at the moment, and I feel like we've just finished smoking about 10 or 15 boxes of cigarettes from that smoke. But it's clear and pleasant now.
Good.
And that's the important thing. Well, Wayne, before we go into Lao Tzu, and folks, this is going to be an adventure, I want to return to something that was so important to me, that is literally, the book is right in my hand right now. It is Getting in the Gap. Mm-hmm. And that insight into prayer is something I use almost every day of my life. And I think it's been 2 or 3 years since we had that program. Could you tell us, just remind us a little bit about the gap and what it is? Because I thought that was so valuable.
Well, it's really that teaching came from Patanjali, who was also an ancient avatar who lived somewhere between 100 and 300 years before the birth of Christ. No one is quite sure. But he was teaching about a meditation called japa, which is the repetition of the sound that's in the name of God in virtually all languages, whether it's Allah or Krishna or God or Yahweh or Tao, whatever name we call this divine intelligence that animates all things, does nothing, and leaves nothing undone. It has a sound basis to it, and that sound is the sound of Ah, which is the sound that you make when you don't have to move your tongue, your teeth, your lips, or your jaw. You don't do anything. The only sound you can make is Ah. And in the book of John, it says at the beginning, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And what I have done is taken Patanjali's work and taught people how to get into the gap, which is the space between our thoughts, so that they say the average person has 60,000 separate thoughts every day. And the only problem is they're going to have the same 60,000 again tomorrow and the next day and the next day, because there's no gaps in between there. And we need to be able to find a way to get into that silent space in between our thoughts. And when we do, we have fewer and fewer of those thoughts. And the fewer thoughts that we have, the more likely we are to make conscious contact with God or with Source. And it's an inner mantra of getting into the gap. And I created it, a way of doing that in that meditation that accompanies that. That allows us to put our attention on our lives and move into this place where we think that we're in control. But an infant is a being that has no identity. It has no name. It takes whatever comes its way. It's in a constant state of just accepting and allowing, and it's not fighting anything. It's not trying to be better than anybody else. It's not worried about what it looks like or what somebody else around it looks like. It's just in a perfect, absolutely perfect state of surrender to the highest place from which it came. And if you could stay in that state, you could literally stay in that state and do nothing and leave nothing undone, you would find that everything in your life would be just nothing but pure bliss.
Edging God out of our lives is something we're very good at doing. Wayne, I think that it would be accurate to say that in this course of this interview, we're going to be talking about edging God back in.
Right.
But now, what does it mean? In other words, that sounds like a very diffuse question, but it isn't, in the sense that when we attempt to open ourselves to God, we're doing something. We're acting. And that this is the exact opposite, in a way, of what the Tao is or is not seeking in us. Is that not correct?
Well, it is and it isn't.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, well, because the Tao is filled with paradoxes all over the place. I mean, every other line in there is a paradox. That's why writing this book was such a wonderful challenge. I mean, some call the Tao Te Ching the wisest book ever written, and yet it's filled with these paradoxes. The paradox of do nothing and leave nothing undone. The paradox of say less and and accomplish more. The paradox of thinking small and accomplishing great things, accomplishing big things, and on and on and on go those ideas of and we in the West have a tendency to think that this is just a prescription for being lazy and not doing anything. When in fact, when you say edging God back in, what that's really doing is just re-identifying yourself with the highest place within yourself. It's not so much identifying yourself on the basis of what I have and what I do and what I accomplish and what other people think of me and my idea of my separation from everything and everyone else. So it's just shifting around your identity so that you understand that who you are is not this body and all of the stuff that you accumulate, that who you are. Like every person listening to the show right now, just ask yourself, how many bodies have I been in since I showed up here on this planet? From the very moment that you were just one tiny little cell, a little tiny drop of human protoplasm, which had everything that you needed for this physical journey in it, to the time when you were an infant, and then you were a toddler, a pre-toddler, and a toddler, and a pre-adolescent, and an adolescent, and you were a 20-year-old. And for me, I've been a 30-year-old and in a 40-year-old body, and I constantly realize that I keep stepping into new bodies. In fact, I'm in a different body now than when you and I started this interview a few moments ago. So that who I am is infinite. Who I am is formless. Who I am is boundaryless. Who I am is this divine piece of the intelligence that creates all things. And it doesn't matter what you call it, whether you call it God or soul or spirit or divine mind or the Tao. It makes no difference, because the opening line of the Tao says the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. The minute that you put a label on it, you've got two things. You've got the thing and you've got the label. You've got duality. Whereas before, what we're trying to do is try to understand oneness. And the only way you can understand oneness, that which cannot be divided, is to be silent. Is to, again, you can only hear by being silent. Another one of the paradoxes that's in there. So moving towards God is really just sort of pushing the ego, the identification of yourself with your things and your accomplishments and your reputation, which is what we're raised to believe who we are. If you could just push that aside, and that's what Lao Tzu calls the false self, and move into the authentic self, the highest self. The highest self is that part of you that's really doing nothing but leaving nothing undone. And it's the part of you that can find deep and profound joy and peace in you. Herman Melville, when he was writing about